xeriscaping. Xeriscaping was coined by the Denver Water Board in 1981 after they had quite a few years of drought and their citizens couldn't water their gardens. So they combined the word landscaping with the Greek word xeros, which means dry. So basically dry landscaping. Defining xeriscaping, but all of them have one thing in common, and that's to conserve water. One of the aims of xeriscaping is to decrease your maintenance. So it's lower maintenance than your conventional Kentucky bluegrass lawn. However, it is not xeriscaping. So some people think that xeriscaping and xeriscaping is the same thing. It is not. There is still some maintenance involved in xeriscaping. Xeriscaping involves the use of plants that are adapted to the climate and precipitation of the area. So for Penticton, we get about 11 inches of precipitation a year, and we have a really dry, hot summer, July and August. So the plants that are adapted to survive without a lot of water here in the Penticton area are mostly the native plants, or plants that are adapted to this area, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. You can have really formal landscapes, like at the college where they have lots of mass plantings of a certain type of plant. And then you can also have very colorful and vibrant, varied gardens like the one above. And it also aims to reduce herbicides by the use of mulch, which I'll be talking about as well. Xeriscaping has 7 basic principles, and in reality, you can spend a whole workshop on each of these principles. So we're only going to do a tip of the iceberg here in this 1-hour presentation, but I hope to touch on all of those. So the first principle is to plan and design your garden. And this is really important so that you can save time later and save money later. So to first begin doing a plan and a design, I would recommend going to the library and getting some planning and design books if you want to do it yourself. For the basics, you start with a sketch of your property with all of your features on it, including your house, your driveway, your sheds, any hard things that you have or buildings, any big trees that you want to keep, power lines, septic fields, all the features that you're aware of that could impact your garden. The next thing you want to do is make a map to try and figure out how you can divide your property into water zones. So this is a really key design tip for xeriscaping. Your vegetable garden and your lawn and your exotic trees and plants, you probably want to have them as close as possible into your high water zone. And then you have, say this is the front yard, used to be lawn, and you think to yourself, do you really need to have it in lawn, or can you change it to a more drought-tolerant landscape? So in this case, you have the high water use, which is the green, and then the medium water use might be some fruit trees or some ornamentals that are already established that you want to keep. And then the rest of it, can you change it to a drought-tolerant landscape? Now within the drought-tolerant landscapes, there are also zones of watering. So you can have some ornamentals that are drought-tolerant, say here, that require a little bit of watering, but not as much as your lawn. And then you have your natives, maybe a section where you want to just cut off water completely and have it not require any irrigation at all. So there's within that also those zones within the xeriscape. So say, for example, you take that front yard and you've got lawn and you need to use pesticides for the dandelions and you need to irrigate a lot and it's still struggling for the Okanagan. So then you want to change it and transform it into a xeriscape. So some of you might go, wow, I had no idea that xeriscaping would require or look like this with lots of plants. Maybe you thought xeriscape was more of a gravel look. But it can be a gravel look or it can be more of a lush look. It's really entirely up to you. It's just making those key decisions of which plants and how to plant them and take care of them. So the first thing that you want to do is get rid of your lawn. So how do you do that? You can hire a landscaper to do the heavy work, and they'll likely use a sod cutter, which is a very heavy piece of machinery to work. And it just cuts the lawn. You roll it up and you take it. You can also rent the sod cutter, so if you wanted to do the work yourself, just keep in mind that it is a very heavy piece of machinery and it's lots of back-breaking labor. So if you're going to get a landscaper to help you, this would be the part that I would hire somebody to do. Or if you have time and you want to take another option, there's several others. You can use black plastic. Try and get heavier duty 3 millimeter or more plastic so that you can lay it out. It needs to be black. And you lay it out over top of your lawn for the hottest part of the summer, so July and August. You cover it, make sure that it doesn't have any, the wind can't pick up the edges, because as soon as light gets in there, your lawn is going to revive again. So to do this, first you mow your lawn really short and you water it really deeply, get it really wet. And then you put the plastic over top of it so that the combination of the water and the heat kill everything pretty well under it. The downfall of this is that you're also killing all your beneficial microorganisms in the soil. So something to think about: once you remove that in September, you're going to have sod that is dead, and also dead microorganisms in your soil is going to be very weak. So after that, you need to get a rototiller and rototill the lawn or the sod that's dead, so that you can use it as part of your soil. And then you do the other steps of xeriscaping, which I'll get to. Another option, and this is an option that I prefer if you have time to do this, it looks nicer and you keep the soil as well. So you have your lawn, which is nice and green, if that's the way it is at the moment, and you cut it as short as you can. You water it really well, and then you edge all of it around the edge. So you take your edger and you get rid of probably a good foot of lawn out of all of the edge, and you put it in the middle. The reason for this is that the edges don't get the light once you start covering it. And that's where the same thing with the black plastic, if the edges get light, they don't die. So you put that on there, you edge it, and then you put some compost over top of it, about 1 inch or 2 of compost. Spread it out, and then a whole bunch of cardboard overlapped, about 50% over top of each other. And you water the cardboard really well so it gets very soaked and wet. And then you put bark mulch right over top of that, about 3 inches thick of bark mulch, and you spread it out, and then you have to wait about 3 to 6 months for all of that to decompose. So you have to continue to water it, which is the tricky part, because you're watering bark mulch, but you're really making this beautiful composted soil underneath that. And then in the fall, if you do it right now, in the fall, if that lawn, so you dig in and see if the lawn has decomposed, then you can spread the mulch out, make a little hole, make your planting hole, and start planting your landscape. You also do your drip irrigation, and you might need to add a little bit more mulch over top just to cover those open areas. So plant selection, and this is the most exciting part of xeriscaping, is trying to figure out which plants to use. There's a huge variety available. Native plants are obviously the ones that are most adapted to survive in the precipitation and climate that we have here in Penticton. And there's several nurseries, Sagebrush Nursery and Grasslands Nursery. Sagebrush is based out of Oliver that grow native plants, and Grasslands Nursery is in Summerland, and they carry some natives as well. So native plants, just to define that term, are plants that are in a certain area that were here before European settlement. And the term can be used quite broadly, so you could say native plants of Canada, which are a lot of different plants. Or you can say the native plants that grow in the Naramata Bench, for example. I would recommend, obviously, the ones that are native to this area. Those are the ones that grow the best. So for example, here we have a Rocky Mountain juniper that can be used as a tall hedge instead of using cedar, which is a real water guzzler. Native plants are also incredibly important ecologically, and as a result of civilization and people building homes and just us being here, we've destroyed a lot of habitat. So by having native plants in your backyard, you're helping the natural ecosystems as well. So a couple of examples. Shrubby penstemon is an excellent low-lying shrub. It's an evergreen. It has beautiful purple tubular flowers that come out in spring and last a little bit into summer. They're great. This plant would be great for a rock garden or along the edge of a bed. Another option is showy aster, and showy aster is a plant that grows to about 3 feet tall. It flowers in the fall and, well, late summer and fall. The other one is rabbit brush, and this particular species of plant you've probably noticed on the hillsides. It would be a great plant for stabilizing slopes if you have a steep slope, or if you do a hybrid garden with ornamentals and natives at the same time, or along a driveway. They flower in the fall. They have these brilliant yellow flowers, and they're sort of silvery gray foliage. Really quite beautiful plant. What do we have here? Ocean spray. Ocean spray is a taller shrub, probably about 10 feet tall. It has these beautiful white panicles. Once the panicles are gone, the flower head that remains, it's not a flower, the seed head that remains is also quite showy, and it lasts through the winter. The leaves of this plant also sort of go a burgundy color in the fall, so they're quite nice. And once the leaves are shed, the bark is quite striking as well. It sort of looks like peeling bark. It's really neat. And the panicles of the seed heads are left over as well. So it's a great plant, for example, as a hedge, or you could use it as a specimen plant. So the other thing about these particular plants and native plants overall is that they're great pollinator plants for insects. Deer tolerant. Oh, rabbit brush is definitely deer tolerant. Shrubby penstemon, I'm not sure if they like that one. They don't like showy aster. I'm not sure about ocean spray. Maybe when they're young, as saplings, they would definitely get devoured by deer, as deer tend to eat a lot of young plants that later on, once they get bigger, they don't eat as much. I think in general, with deer, if it's a young plant, you need to protect it until it gets bigger. So for pollinating insects, one really interesting little tidbit fact. In the Okanagan and Similkameen, we have about 300 to 350 different species of bees alone. So it's fantastic if we can help them out with some native plants. And as far as grasses, there's a whole variety, but just two examples. Blue bunch wheatgrass can be used in a mixed garden bed. It greens up later in the summer, and it's small, about 3 feet high. And then this other one, giant wild-grass, is an amazing plant. It grows very, very tall, about 10 feet high. Some of you may have noticed it in sort of wetter areas when you go up for hikes in the hills. Beautiful plant. It's a clumping plant with straw-colored seed heads. And if you want to learn more about native plants, you could do a whole workshop on them. Eva Durance, who's my mentor in Xeriscaping, wrote a book, and I believe the library also has it available. Ornamental plants that are drought tolerant, there is also a huge variety. And I would encourage you to check out the Okanagan Xeriscape Association website. So Okanagan Xeriscape Association, they have a website that has a database. If you're looking for a particular bloom season, or a particular color of plant, or a size, or whether you want it to be completely dry tolerant so that you don't have to water it at all, or low or medium watering, you can also put that in to the database. So it's brilliant if you have a chance. So how do you do your landscape design? If you have the eye for it, would like to do it yourself, by all means, go for it. The library has great books on how to plan and how to design your landscape. Another option is you could design it partly yourself, and there's some landscape designers, including myself, who are willing to come out and meet with you for an hour or two just to bounce back ideas and finalize your plan. So that's another option. Or the other option is you hire a landscape designer or an architect. Now the difference is that architects deal more with larger landscapes that need some earth moving done. So for example, if you have a retaining wall that needs to be built, or you want to build an outdoor patio, or those types of bigger landscape projects that need some earth moving. So once you have your plan and you have your plant in the ground, you want to make sure that you have efficient irrigation. So one thing that I want to first convey is that when you first put native plants in the ground, or ornamental drought-tolerant plants, any plant, you need to water it just like you would any other ornamental plant for the first 2 years probably, until the roots are well established. Then you can start cutting them off of water, or going back to their actual regime. So how to save water? Definitely water on calm days, or in the morning, or at night, so that the water soaks well and deeply into the soil. You want to water at least an inch deeply. So what I do if you have either emitters, I don't know so we'll talk about micro irrigation in a minute, or if you have a sprinkler head, you can get a whole bunch of tuna cans and you set them out over your lawn or over your landscape, wherever you're watering, and you turn on your sprinkler or your little water emitters, and you wait till it fills about an inch deep, and you time it. And so that's how long you should have your sprinklers on, and then turn them off. For plants that have just been planted, you might need to water them 1 inch deep. But when the leaves start to droop, that's a real sign that definitely you need to water again. Now, micro irrigation is one of the other tenets of xeriscaping, is if you can get into it. Now, I brought some examples of micro irrigation for those that haven't seen it, but basically it involves having your main pipe, and it's quite easy to learn how to do if you're wanting to install it yourself. You have your punch, so you just put a hole through there, and then you have your emitters, and these come in different sizes, so it can be 1 gallon, 2 gallon, 5 gallon, 10 gallons per hour, I believe it is. And then you just poke that in so that it's attached like that, and you line that up with your plant, and then you have a staple that ties it down to the ground so that it doesn't move around in the wind. And then there's also these kinds of water emitters where you just put this in the ground and it sprays. So this is a little sprayer. And you also can get little tubes so that if you need to reach a plant from your main tube out to your plant, you can attach it and do that as well. You can divide your Xeriscape landscape into 3 watering zones. So with your dry plants, you cut them off after they're established. So say 2 years after they've established, you can cut them off to not watering them at all if they're ones that are of that zone. Or maybe they just need to be watered in July once and in August once. Because usually when you water, you only water 1 inch. So just to give you the relevance of this, 1 inch per watering. So for the dry zone, if you need 3 inches, that would mean 1 watering in July, August, and September. So I'm just going to jump to the medium ones. We don't do a high, but the medium ones would be usually the more ornamentals that are very brightly colored. And they need 8 to 11 inches. So for example, you would need to start watering, say in June, maybe once, and then in July, once a week. Mulch is also really important. It's like the blanket that covers the soil. It'll keep the water in the soil and keep the soil organisms happy. It also keeps the seeds from sprouting. If you're working off of soil that is like underneath your lawn, for example, most likely you have enough soil in there to not need supplements. Usually with drought tolerant and ornamentals, you need supplemental nutrients if you're starting with sort of a sandy or a very clay-based soil. Two basic mulches that you can use. The organic one, which I'm just going to call bark mulch for now, is really good at absorbing and retaining water close to the roots of the plant. Now, one thing to be aware of when you're putting your layer of bark mulch, and you want about 3 inches thick, make sure that you don't drown your plant. So keep about, I would say, a distance around your stem of a fist distance, because you don't want it to be right next to the stem, because it'll drown it, kill it. The nice thing about bark mulch is it also builds the soil as it decomposes, but that's also one disadvantage in that you do need to bring some more in about every 2 to 3 years to make sure that the layer stays there or continues. It keeps the plants cooler and it's easier to weed. Now the purpose of mulch is also to keep weeds from coming in and settling in, but inevitably if after a few years if the mulch starts to thin out, you will have some weed seeds in there sprouting. But it is really easy to weed them compared to, say, gravel or rocks and what have you. So this is a really good picture of what happens is that the organic matter, leaves, fall onto it, and then it decomposes, it forms a soil layer in those crevices, and then the seeds are really happy because they can sprout there. So when you put down gravel or rocks as mulch, be aware that you're trading in your lawnmower for a leaf blower, because you're going to have to clear that leaf away every fall. Of course, you don't have to do it every week like in your lawn, but you do have to keep the leaf matter off of there. The other thing to keep in mind with inorganics is that they do heat up the air around them. So if you have a house and then a whole bunch of gravel around, your ambient temperature is going to increase and you're going to have to use your air conditioner a little bit more. That's why I prefer the organic mulch. It's also really challenging to weed, especially if you have that layer of plastic or weed barrier underneath it. That's a whole other topic of conversation. Some landscapers love to use it, some people don't. I would prefer not to have it, just because if you're not upkeeping your air blowing, then you're going to have weeds starting to sprout, and then the roots grab onto that layer of weed barrier underneath, and it's really hard to get the weeds out. It's also, in my mind, really ugly when often you just see the plastic layer sticking out if it's not maintained. And it's also a pollutant because it's an oil product that will stay there and doesn't decompose for decades. So if you can work without it, I would recommend doing that. Your maintenance schedule changes completely between having a lawn and having a Xeriscape. You're going to be doing more of the work in spring and fall versus summer versus all year round, or well, except for winter. You're going to need to check your irrigation in the springtime, and sort of throughout the summer, just check it here and there, especially if you're using micro irrigation, making sure that your seed heads aren't plugged up or that they haven't come apart and you have a whole bunch of water just spilling. But just a little walkthrough, and that's all it takes. And in the fall, you have to blow out your irrigation. For weeding, there's not a lot of weeding to be done once your garden is established, especially if you're upkeeping with putting the mulch on and making sure that the soil is not exposed. Mulching, as I was saying, you have to top up your bark mulch if that's what you're using every 2 or 3 years, or you have to do the leaf blowing in the fall if you're using the inorganic mulch. And of course, pruning, that also happens in the spring. And in the fall, in the spring, you're pruning a lot of your grasses. So if you have your bigger grasses, they need to be pruned in the springtime before the growth starts to come. And if you have flowers or any shrubs that need to be deadheaded, then that's an ongoing thing that happens as well. Depends on how much flowering you want. So it can be really fun too. As I was mentioning, a whole bunch of resources that are available. There's the Okanagan Xeriscape Association, which has a great database. The Summerland Ornamental Gardens, has anybody been out there? Some of you have. They have an incredible section on xeriscaping, and they've added to it. So you can see what the plants look like. They have a little name tag and get an idea of what plant goes with what. So I really recommend visiting that place as well. And the other demonstration garden is the city of Penticton. How many of you have visited there? Some of you as well? So great. Another great resource to be able to see the plants in action. The only trouble there is that they haven't upkept their name tags, so you don't know what plant is which anymore. But they do have brochures that you can pick up that have a map of the plant of the garden, and you can sort of figure out which plant was that one and look at the map at the same time.
And on behalf of the Penticton Public Library, thanks very much for coming. I'm sorry about not having a